Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is June 5th, Tuesday, June 5th, 2018. Not Wednesday, June 5th, not Monday, June 5th, but Tuesday, June 5th. How do you know which one it's going to be? You can keep track of these things. Fantastic new invention called the calendar. I should probably get one, but my computer tells me what the day and the date is. I just depend on it to be right. God help us if that Y2K bug ever catches up with us. I think we got that one under control, though. Good morning. Daily Co's Radio is live now. My computer tells me that, too. It tells me that Bill says so, and he's in Portland, Maine, and I think that's probably a great place from which to, let's say, set yourself up as the arbiter of what time it is and whether or not certain radio shows are live. I think that's a fantastic place to do it from. I'd rather be doing it there than here, I think, at the moment, though it's quite pleasant out today. Weather report, it looks all right, okay? Get out there and play golf if you're the President of the United States, or whatever it is you do that keeps you happy. God bless you. Just make yourself happy, Mr. President. Daily Coast Radio is live now with the recent revelations of witness tampering by Paul Manafort. I didn't even get to that yet. Kagro X, that's me. Hello, everybody. Leads his listeners in a 2-hour chant of lock him up, lock him up. We could probably do that, and it's not a bad way to spend the show, quite honestly. Another day, another, gosh, I wish this guy would just drop dead already sort of feeling, and it's not really pleasant to live this way, but not that much choice that I've got. He's really just been particularly obnoxious the last couple of days. That's not the lead story, I guess. I don't know. The lead story about the president and being annoying today is about the Philadelphia Eagles visit / non-visit / the creeping Sharia story in the White House. And I guess we might as well just kick it off with that one before we get to the important news that Bill was talking about. I don't know. That way we can get it off our chests, or should we go to the real news? If Greg were here, he would say we should do the real news first. He might give me a choice. All right, fine. We'll reverse course and say Paul Manafort is going to jail. And I mean, maybe like right now. Here's the report from the Washington Post via that stupid, annoying, and ubiquitous AMP platform that I think somebody finally explained to me serves these things up on your computer faster, and so we appreciate it for that purpose. But I don't know. It's weird, and it changes the appearance of the articles, and that bothers me. But the content of the article is the same. Mueller, that is to say, just in case if you prefer to read newspapers, but you're giving us a try today, I don't want you to feel uncomfortable or lost in the narrative. Robert S. Mueller III, he's the former FBI director, now serving as special counsel. You get the idea? Investigating, everything under the sun. Special counsel Robert Mueller says Paul Manafort is witness tampering, which is allowed, I think, in the Constitution if you know somebody very powerful. So really, I don't know what's going on here. Federal prosecutors, because that's what Robert Mueller is, accused former Trump presidential campaign chairman Paul Manafort of witness tampering late Monday. Monday, of course, that's the first day of the work week, and I'm giving you the Vox explainers. It was dated, as I understand, June 4th, 2018. That's somebody during the Middle Ages calculated, we're in year 2018, supposedly from the year of the birth. You get the idea. I don't have to explain all this to you on background. We can just assume that there's common understanding. All right. Late Monday, he was accused of witness tampering publicly in his criminal case and asked the federal judge to consider revoking or revising his release. I guess he's on house arrest. I don't know whether he wears an ankle monitor or not, but I think they should go to the old iron ball and chain at this point. Maybe manacles. I don't know. Prosecutors accused Manafort and a longtime associate they linked to Russian intelligence of repeatedly contacting two members of a public relations firm and asking them to falsely testify about secret lobbying they did at Manafort's behest. Probably not smart. And honestly, if you get a phone call from Manafort and they ask you for anything at his behest and you're not his attorney, don't do it. And if you are his attorney, maybe also don't do it. The firm of former senior European officials, informally called the Habsburg Group. Boy, those are some senior European officials. The Habsburgs, very senior people. I think maybe not the same ones. Anyway, they were secretly retained in 2012 by Manafort to advocate for Ukraine, where Manafort had clients, prosecutors charged. That's a totally separate issue. Then I guess he started to go tamper with them as witnesses. So let's find out about this. In court documents, prosecutors with, you'll never guess, Robert S. Mueller III, special counsel, alleged that Manafort and his associate, referred to only as Person A, that sounds very sinister. That was really lame. I wish I could blame that on a sound effects guy. Okay, anyway, only Person A tried to contact the two witnesses by phone and through encrypted messaging apps. Sneaky. The description of Person A matches his longtime business colleague in Ukraine, Konstantin Kilimnik. Only Person A. A.K.A. Konstantin K. Ilimnik K. All right, it matches the description. Fine. Manafort, 69. Ha. That's his age. Has been on home confinement pending trial. FBI agent Brock W. Domin, D-O-M-I-N. Agent Brock. What do you call him? What? FBI agent Brock Domin, not M. Domin, W. Domin, everybody, said, middle initials in this paper. All right, said that one of the public relations firm's executives identified as Person D1. Really? It's not Person E, huh? This is it closely matches the description of Manafort's former colleague, who are conjoined twin colleagues at his former firm. What is D1 about? We'll never get to the bottom of this if we don't just read. Okay, fine. Agent Brock said that one of the public relations firm's executives identified as Person D1 told the government he, quote, understood Manafort's outreach to be an effort to, quote, suborn perjury. Wow. By encouraging others to lie to federal investigators by concealing the firm's work in the United States. I like that. Encouraging others to lie. You can do it. Lie. Yay. L-I-E. I encourage, I understand, but it's just a funny phrasing to me. And that he offers up suborn perjury. I mean, okay. Wow. Well, this person was really concerned. Spokesman for Manafort and the special counsel's office, who are under a court gag order in the case, declined to comment. Manafort has pleaded not guilty to conspiracy, money laundering, and tax and bank fraud charges relating to his lobbying work for a pro-Russian political party in Ukraine and former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. The filings mark the second time prosecutors have complained to the judge about Manafort's behavior awaiting trial. The other time he ran around without his pants on, and that was disturbing to everybody. Early in the case, this is something different. After he was released to his home, the investigators said they intercepted emails showing Manafort helped write an opinion piece defending his actions that ran in Ukrainian publications. And so it's interesting. What we're looking at here is, well, he's charged with some fairly serious crimes. Well, I mean, the crimes aren't terribly serious in and of themselves. It's just they're also connected to, like, the most serious crime ever, stealing the presidency. But so he convinces the court, I'm not a flight risk. I don't have access to millions of dollars stashed away in coffee cans or rolled up inside antique rugs that I was using to money launder, international mobster funds. I'm not a jet setter. I don't own a condo in Trump Tower or anything. Oh, yeah, I do? Oh, really? So fine, you can be on home confinement. And I guess he was high profile enough that they thought, well, he can't just slip out and go to the airport and not be noticed. So there he is on home confinement, and he starts writing emails to others, trying to get them to, write an opinion piece defending his actions for the Ukrainian newspapers. And the prosecutors complain. The court says, yes, stop doing that. So what he does is, I'm not going to stop doing it. I'm going to do it in encrypted emails instead. Like, they caught me, but what if they couldn't read my emails because they were encrypted? Then, even if they caught me sending emails, they couldn't tell what I was saying, except they can. And now you're busted. I mean, the guy just won't stop doing crimes. They should just lock him up. And that may be what happens. All right, so prosecutors filed a motion on Monday in Manafort's pending Washington case. He's got two pending. This was filed in the Washington, D.C. case, which includes the charges of filing misleading lobbying disclosure statements, and they also noted his alleged tampering in his related tax and bank fraud case in Alexandria. So that is kind of interesting. I wonder if that'll stand as some sort of technicality to keep him out of jail. Well, the first complaint was with respect to your Virginia case. The second complaint was with respect to your Washington, D.C. case. So you haven't had your two strikes yet. You've got 1 and 1 going on here. Anyway, I think most judges can probably take judicial notice of the fact that, you've been witness tampering before, and now you're at it again, only hoping that encryption will hide it. I really can't distinguish between the facts that one of your letters is to a witness in the Alexandria case, and the other is to one of your witnesses in the Washington case. You're a witness tamperer, you bastard. You're going in. You hit a cop. You're going in. Just wanted to pull the old Boston accent from Good Will Hunting on that one. Okay. Prosecutors filed the motion on Monday in the Washington case, right? If a judge were to revoke Manafort's bail conditions and order him to jail pending his 2 trials this summer, that would intensify the pressure on him to reach a plea deal with prosecutors, which wouldn't be a bad thing. I think that would be nice, and we should get started with that as soon as possible. Also, he should forfeit whatever, collateral he put up as bail, I think. But that I don't think that's the way it works. I just think we should take that stuff. Many white-collar prosecutions are built by charging people lower down in an organization and then flipping those defendants into prosecution witnesses to get leniency in their sentencing. Manafort has repeatedly declared his intention to fight the charges against him, but it wasn't immediately clear on Monday night whether the renewed prospect of going to jail would alter his legal strategy. Manafort's potential value as a prosecution witness is unclear, but as Trump's former campaign chairman, he participated in multiple high-level discussions within the campaign that are of great interest to investigators. According to a February indictment, just in case you don't know who Manafort is, Manafort in 2012 and 2013 used offshore accounts to wire more than 2 million euros to pay the former politicians who were described as independent actors instead of paid lobbyists. that doesn't... okay. I mean, the former politicians that we're talking about are who? I don't know. Associates of Manafort's. We do know. It's on the record, but I'm losing that particular thread of that narrative. Monday's court filing highlighted a new role, the person A, whom prosecutors did not name but described in detail in related cases. The description matches Kalimnik, the Russian manager of Manafort's lobbying office for 10 years in Ukraine. Remember that? A Russian citizen born in Ukraine, Kalimnik worked for Manafort in Kiev, first as a translator, later as the in-country operator of Manafort's operations. The operator of operations. Well done. He continued to serve as a close Manafort associate during the months Manafort worked for President Trump's campaign, including visiting Manafort in person, I wish that said in prison, in New York in May and August of 2016. He is a Russian army veteran who trained at a language school that experts say is a recruiting ground for Russian intelligence agencies. Kalimnik has denied having intelligence ties, or intelligence for that matter. Kalimnik did not respond to a request for comment on Monday. During his August 2016 meeting with Kalimnik, Manafort has said, he and his longtime Kiev office manager discussed, among other topics, the ongoing campaign, including the hacking of the DNC emails. Stolen DNC emails, of course, had been released by WikiLeaks the previous month, and the hack was widely suspected to be the work of Russia. During Kalimnik's time working for Manafort in Kiev, he served as a liaison for Manafort with the Russian aluminum magnate, still stuck on that term, Oleg Deripaska, with whom Manafort had done business. Emails previously described to the Post show that Manafort asked Kilimnik during the campaign to offer Deripaska private briefings about Trump's effort. A Deripaska spokeswoman said, remember, they never even, they denied having the briefings. They denied asking for the briefings. All of that nonsense. But just to refresh your memory about who Manafort was running with and why it was a problem and why he is worried at all. I think I did see somebody guess aloud, sort of, on Twitter, the way you can do anything aloud on Twitter, that it wasn't jail that Paul Manafort was terribly worried about. It was polonium. So, that's a real threat out there. Not one we can leverage against you, though. But the fact that there's murderers out, you'd be safer in jail, I guess. But maybe we can do something, I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't offer any of these guys protection. I say let them all get murdered by polonium, and then we'll be finished with them. And start at the top. I'm just saying, wherever you find, whatever you think is the apex of the conspiracy. And we got to tell you, it's increasingly difficult as we watch this president flail around to believe that he really was the apex of any kind of conspiracy. I think he was just an idiot in the middle of a situation he constantly keeps himself in, and he's responsible for it, absolutely. But I think he just he conducted the second half of his business career just steeped in these oligarch / mobsters in their culture, and just thought, I'm not in jail now, so I'll just continue to do what I'm doing, and that'll be that. And no one will ever catch me because, look, nobody takes white-collar crime seriously in this country. They really don't. And now that I'm a famous star, they'll let you do anything. He really did believe that. And he was right with respect to the prosecution of white-collar crime. It just doesn't happen a great deal. There are other fish to fry. So that's where the effort goes to. All right, let's see. What else have we got to catch up on? Right. Oh, we were talking about the visit / non-visit, the cancellation of the visit of the, I'm not going to say Super Bowl trooper Philadelphia Eagles. You can't make me say that. But that's what happened. The Philadelphia Eagles, allegedly, with the help of the Russians, won the Super Bowl. And, I'm not saying it's illegitimate. I'm just saying there ought to be an investigation. But as a result, you know what happens in this country. You win a major sporting event, or even a minor sporting event, really, and you get invited to the White House because it's not just Trump, obviously. It's been happening for a long time. It's just a thing that happens, and everybody likes it, and pictures are taken. But increasingly, with Donald Trump in the White House, teams are opting not to go. Sometimes it's in protest of the treatment of minorities in this country. Sometimes it is a protest of the disgusting, filthy son of a bitch who's the president of the United States, or says he is. I don't know. That's not the way I would say it, because I'm just relaying, the thoughts that I'm reading in the newspapers here. Again, we don't do the reporting. Lots of people, many people are saying that they think he is a rotten, filthy son of a bitch, bastard, thief, child molester, whatever. And I'm just a conduit for those thoughts. And if that doesn't work, this is a comedy show. And I'm just kidding. How about that? All the hedges I need to stay out of jail, right? Or stay out of the civil docket anyway. So what ends up happening is, as a matter of course, teams get invited, and increasingly people don't want to go to the White House because Trump is a jackass, and they don't want to be a part of anything he does, and they can't stand to look at his stupid orange leathern face. Just like me. Boy, those sports heroes, they're just like you and me. So the Philadelphia Eagles were invited, and most of them didn't want to go. And it's really actually kind of a fascinating thing that how this came to be. First of all, the Eagles had to win the Super Bowl, which is really difficult to swallow in the first place. But okay, they did it. And, all right, and Trump stages an event. And as it turns out, the team meets, because this is now a trend. Teams going to the White House say, I don't want to go. And there's lots of people who are like, I don't care to meet the president at all. And I don't want to be there. And I can't pretend to like him. And I don't want to go through pleasantries. And it would be really difficult. You know, you're part of an organization. You don't want it to reflect badly necessarily on the organization, what your personal feelings about the president are. But I would guess that a lot of people who are outspoken think if I'm ever really face to face with him, I'm just going to say something inappropriate to, well, really any public situation, except, you know, in normal times. Again, in normal times, you wouldn't just say, okay, well, here, you know, let me introduce you to. Congratulations on winning the Super Bowl. And I answer, F you, you lying, cheating son of a bitch. I can't stand you. Your face makes me want to puke. And you're a Russian stooge. And I can't wait for you to drop dead. But when it happens, I hope it hurts. Oh, well, punch? Would you like something? Can I get you cookies? Anything like that? It's not going to work out. And you'll end up at Target, and people will be, you know, emailing you death threats, and Frog Twitter will yell at you. And even if you don't care about that, why not just stay home and enjoy yourself and have a nice life, right? So most people opted not to go. Apparently, after the team meetings, they were down to like 8 to 10 members of the team who were willing to go to the White House. And, you know, I mean, if you're the president, I'd say, la-di-da, go on. Have it, you know, if you like having football players or sports champions come to the White House, then fine. They go and do it. And the people who are willing show up, and that's that. But Trump is insulted. And it turns out, you know, most of the people are just not coming because they can't stand President Trump. And it's not so here's what happens. The president issues a statement essentially saying, well, he's done this before. It's not that you don't want to come to the White House. You're not allowed to come to my White House. I am disinviting you because you have no respect for our nation's flag and the fighting men and women. You know, he invented an episode in the flag thing, and it's not the flag thing. It's not even a protest of the flag. It's the protest that happens to take place during the national anthem, because that's when there's a focus on the players with their helmets off, and they're in this contemplative mode. And you know the story. And they're protesting police brutality, but the White House turns it into, well, no, it's a protest of the flag, and I hate people who hate the flag, and that just goes to show you there's the tolerant left for you. Wait a minute, you're right, sir. Well, tolerance, whatever. It was nonsense from the beginning. Worse still here is, if you saw what got circulated this morning was the Fox News coverage of the cancellation, which was, you know, quite startling, I think. They played all the video you would think you would see about this stuff. Here's, can I get this one up here? Maybe we should, it's... The audio of it, which is all you'll hear, is not particularly telling, but it's a Fox News blonde lady reading the copy about how President Trump is angry with NFL players who protest the flag and take a knee during the national anthem. And so they begin running footage of Philadelphia Eagles players, granted they actually are Philadelphia Eagles players in most cases, some of them, by the way, well, we'll get to that in a minute, on one knee, and then saying over it, you know, the voiceover, and the flag protest thing, yada, yada, yada. And it was never a flag protest to begin with anyway, but doesn't matter. They've conflated it into one. So the second layer that gets added here is these were photos of players on one knee, not during the national anthem, in some cases not even during this past actual football season, because some of the photos included players that were not on the team last year, and they're praying, as football players sometimes do, like, I'm about to play a game that might leave me paralyzed or brain dead or kill me over a relatively short period of time with traumatic brain injury. I hope I survive. Let's pray together. They literally, that's actually it. I mean, they know that they're going into danger. And they also want to win. I don't know if they're really praying for wins. I think they're just praying for playing well and not getting hurt. And that's disturbing all by itself. But there they are, praying on one knee. And remember when everybody in Trump land was, oh my God, liberals hate when people pray. Look what they're doing to Tim Tebow. So here are a couple of players actually praying. And instead, Fox News just says, no, look, they're protesting the flag, which they wouldn't have been doing had they been taking a knee during the national anthem anyway. But that wasn't it. So I happened to see it in the form, and I guess everybody's now catching on to it in media world, the tweet of Zach Ertz, who I don't know because I don't like the Philadelphia Eagles, but he's I guess, what is he? He's number 86. It's probably a tight end. Looks like a tight end. Zach Ertz, anyway, is his name, and he's tweeting about this Fox News report. Fox News tweeted it out. The Fox News tweet reads, President Donald Trump, they're tagging him with his real Donald Trump Twitter handle, says Philadelphia Eagles won't attend White House ceremony amid national anthem dispute. Except, of course, it has nothing to do with the national anthem dispute. As it happens, the Eagles, I do not believe, according to the players and people who actually follow them because they like the Philadelphia Eagles, which I have a hard time grasping, but okay, there are such people. They say nobody protested. The Eagles Eagles players didn't involve themselves in this protest, apparently, during the past season, or at least certainly not during the Super Bowl. And instead, they have this footage of people praying. And Zach Ertz says exactly that. This can't be serious. Praying before games with my teammates. It's his picture that they're showing. I'm praying with my teammates before a game, well before the anthem is played. And it's being used for your propaganda. Just sad. I feel like you guys should have been better than this. But of course, I think we all know that there's no chance Fox was ever going to be better than this. And Zach either is being too kind or needs to wake up. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, though. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I don't know. I guess we're pretty much done with this. You've probably caught up with this information already. But if you hadn't seen Zach Ertz's tweet, I mean, I think that really sums it up, except for the fact that I think he's being too kind to Fox News here. Michael Musson commenting that the Eagles had an easy out. If you make me meet the president and during a photo op, I'll be taking a knee. And then, of course, they won't take the picture. Or they wouldn't circulate the picture, but the point would have been made, I suppose. And but that's the thing. Over at the Eagles organization, they're not making anyone meet the president. I did see Empty Wheel tweet earlier today, and I believe I retweeted it. And this is my secondary, my backup system to Pocket. If I retweet something, sometimes I'm marking it for, in addition to my wanting you guys to see it, I am marking it for later discussion. Where did she do this? It was earlier this morning. She said that when the Patriots had been invited to the White House earlier, because many of you know the New England Patriots once won the Super Bowl as well, which, I have less difficulty with because, anytime the Giants are there, they don't win it. So I'm cool with the rest of it, although I wish they'd stop doing it because it's getting boring. But maybe not for you if you're a Patriots fan. Empty Wheel, though, tweeted, remember that he didn't do this, that is, Trump didn't disinvite the Patriots when a greater number of Pats refused to show. So that's interesting because I had heard that they were down to like 8 to 10 Eagles were going to go. How many fewer are there really there to, it doesn't matter how many players are on a football team roster if you're subtracting down from 8. But I would imagine, was that the case, that fewer than 8? Or maybe I just didn't get correct information about how few Eagles were going to go. But if that's the case, that is very interesting. Of course, it's easily explicable in that Trump is personal friends with the Patriots owner and probably just wanted to have him to the White House and didn't really care what else was going on. Plus, I guess he was into Tom Brady because Tom Brady was into him, and you know how that can be. Trump has a hard time keeping his pants on when he finds out people are into him. So I don't know, maybe things are just escalating and he's getting touchier and touchier as time goes on, or more and more touched possibly as time goes on. That could explain it as well. So that's where we stand. News update. I guess they decided to use the fake Melania yesterday. I'm doing this because I'm on the radio. You're supposed to come up with shocking and outrageous theories about what actually happened in the news. And if you promote the conspiracy theory that Melania is missing or dead or gravely injured and therefore not appearing in public, and we haven't disproven that one, I guess, given that she's had time to recover. But if you thought she was dead or buried in that sinkhole or whatever, or was her decaying corpse that was causing the sinkhole, whatever your theory might have been, allegedly Melania Trump, a.k.a. Melania Knavs, dun, dun, dun. Oh, it's very sinister and foreign sounding shit. Melanie, on Twitter, showed up as scheduled. There was a big to-do that she was finally going to make a semi-public appearance. She came out of the residence, but it was for a closed event and closed to the press. And you had a good excuse for closing it to the press. It was a reception at the White House for Gold Star families. I don't know why they had that. That's good press for the president, except he fought with Gold Star families during the campaign. But now no one forgot this, I don't think. And no one is surprised that he would welcome Republican Gold Star families but shun Democratic Gold Star families. Ordinarily, that would be too political a move to be contemplated by a sitting president of the United States. This one, though, is open and notorious in his biases this way. He does this all the time and refers to Democratic and Republican judges or justices on the Supreme Court, and is very obvious and open in his targeting, for instance, of Democratic states that vote Democratic, or and rewarding states that vote Republican. So par for the course, I guess, in that respect. And so she was scheduled to show up, and apparently she did. And some photos inevitably always are released from that, sometimes officially, sometimes not. But I don't know what I was looking at, but Mark Knoller, is that right? From CBS News was circulating one or another of them, but I guess had been approved. I'm sure he was not going rogue in circulating the photo. And a person, or possibly a mannequin, alleging to be Melania was there. So the conspiracy theory that they were simply going to keep her hidden and pretend that she, had gone on vacation, that one, I guess, has been debunked. They brought out the wax figure and said, this is it. I love the idea of just I think they should have brought out somebody completely different. I was saying this yesterday afternoon on Twitter. Really, at this point, I might have a good time working in the White House if it wasn't for the fact that we were destroying, the world with this administration. It as a troll, it might be very fun. And I'm sure Stephen Miller is having a blast trolling the world. I mean, I think he should be killed for it ultimately, but okay. In due time. I'm not saying that it has to be the work of man, whatever. But being a professional troll has got to be a blast. I would have brought out somebody, an obvious fake, or just a completely different person, or like get get a spokesmodel or something from Donald Trump's past. I have access to a lot of beautiful women. The most beautiful women, I'm telling you. I'm really, honestly, the most beautiful women, some would say, in the history of women. And but bring one out and just say, this is Melania. And I would do it just to see what got reported. Really, honestly, at this point, I want to troll the White House press corps. Bring out a completely and obviously different person. Somebody in a wig, somebody in sunglasses, somebody that doesn't even make an attempt to look like Melania. I would try that. An animal of some kind. It doesn't matter. And I would have brought them out and just pretended like that was Melania, semi tongue-in-cheek, outwardly. I'd laugh about it and everything. I just want to see what got reported, although it would be more fun if you just deadpanned it. What are you people talking about? This is Melania. Just to see, I would love to know, what would the press corps report, if anything? What would they say? She wasn't, she was supposed to show up, but she didn't. And White House staff made no comment or offered no excuse and just leave it at that. Would they report? As odd as it is to say, the president of the United States, in what appeared to be all seriousness, showed up with someone completely different who's clearly not Melania and said it was Melania. It was unclear whether the president was joking, but if so, he didn't let on. I'd be very curious how it got reported, as opposed to, because it would be something like that, right? That would be the only reasonable, quote unquote, reasonable thing to report, right? As opposed to, the president is obviously insane. He has lost his mind. He pretended in all seriousness. I don't know whether he was pretending or he's just driven himself to believe this, or whether he is on Ambien or what. But the president insisted that this person who was clearly not Melania was Melania. And I think he's mentally ill. I'm sure that we would opt for another explanation, right? But I mean, it raises the question, very abstract question of, when might it be justified? Under what circumstances would a member of the press, and I guess maybe it really literally is never, report in all seriousness, not as an opinion column, but as the White House correspondent, the president was totally insane today. I say this advisedly, but he for instance, he emerged from behind the curtain in the press room today, wearing a large rubber boot on his head, the way Vermin Supreme is known to do. And it was concerning to this reporter, and I believe the president has lost his mental faculties. Or would it be in a brilliant send-up of fringe presidential candidate known as Vermin Supreme, noted jokester Donald J. Trump today? I wonder what would do. I mean, we know that painting his face orange doesn't do it. Well, that's spray tanning. That's actually a thing. Well, why does he paint a, pink reverse raccoon eye goggle thing around his eye sockets? Again, when he gets the spray can, he puts the goggles on to protect his eyes, and they don't have any he's not into spending lots of money on makeup. Of course he is. I don't know. I don't know why we make this excuse. He's painted. If it was purple or green, perhaps people would say that doesn't really jive with the idea of a spray tan. So maybe now I accept that he's a goofball. I don't know. I'm not certain what it takes. I mean, being a liar, even now, as reporters are willing to say, well, he really is a inveterate liar. But then they won't say that each individual lie is a lie. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. They say, I need to know the motivation, etc. I'm just curious whether there really, literally is anything at all that you could do that would make the press break down that, I don't know what, that screen, that veil that keeps them from just saying, look, I was on hand. Why are you in the White House at all? Why be there in person if it's not to be the eyes and ears on the ground to come back and say, you know what? Behind it all, the president has lost his marbles. He's just not mentally with it. he cannot do this job. And maybe it was the case from the beginning, and it's taken me a long time to come around to this. But we really need to do something. And maybe it's that. Maybe it's an unwillingness to get sued. Maybe it's, I don't know what the something is, so why bother? I'm just curious. I guess the real reason is, so far, he hasn't shown this press corps anything that makes them say that that's the case, which is really kind of astonishing given all the things that he has shown. But it does make you wonder whether there really could be anything. And I would love to have tested that with bringing a totally fake first lady and insisting, nope, that's her. So let's see. Karen D has commented, except it's a Gold Star family event, and I'm not sure. Too much time has passed for me to figure out exactly what that was about. But if you'd like to clarify, we can answer about that. I don't know. I mean, or maybe you don't want to bring the fake Melania. Is that it? To the Gold Star family event because you don't want to take away from the Gold Star families. That, again, would be something that would happen in normal times, but these aren't normal times. Because by the account I read of the event, the president did, in fact, as expected, make the bulk of his remarks about himself at a Gold Star family event. And he did, in fact, engage in joking banter about Melania's appearance there. And it was noted in Mark Knoller's coverage of the event that was particularly awkward. I think, well, maybe it wasn't Knoller's coverage, but I did note that somebody said, yeah, it made for a really awkward moment at this event for Gold Star families, that A, the focus was so much on him, and that's always going to happen, and B, that, joking about the Melania thing seemed inappropriate to the reporter who was writing it up. So that's no barrier for him, if that was the issue. All right. Other issues that have made it to Pocket, or I guess my Twitter feed, I'll have to comb through some of these things. I did see there are several such efforts. Yesterday, we read an older one, about a year old, from, was it Lawrence Tribe, I think, and Norm Eisen, and I think there was another name on the list too, and I gave those names to you yesterday. We'll start over today with a newer one, a newer compilation of august reasoning why the president can't do any of the things that his proxies have been insisting he can do over the past day or so. This time, a law professor letter on the president's Article 2 powers. And it's one of those open letters where you can, if you are presumably a law professor, add your name to the letter if you agree with it. It is addressed, it's written yesterday and addressed to Donald McGahn, the White House counsel, Donald McGahn II, in case you are a stickler for such things, and Emmett Flood, who did in fact take the job as listed here, special counsel to the president. I really thought he was going to walk away from this, and he may yet, but I thought he wasn't going to sign on like Geneva and Tenzing. Anyway, the letter begins, "Dear Mr. McGahn and Mr. Flood," as opposed to the old style of "Dear," how do they, Misters, which looks like Messrs. McGahn and Flood. "We, legal scholars who study and teach constitutional and criminal law, write in connection with the president's apparent belief that he is empowered by the Constitution to halt the special counsel's investigation into alleged Russian interference, oh my God, into the 2016 election, we know, for any reason whatsoever, and his apparent view that he is not constrained by Congress's duly enacted laws prohibiting the obstruction of justice. As reported in the New York Times, attorneys for the president wrote a letter to special counsel Robert S. Mueller, they didn't say the third, asserting that the Constitution empowers him to, quote, terminate the inquiry or even exercise his power to pardon, and that he cannot illegally obstruct any aspect of the investigation because of these powers. These views are incorrect, and they are, but so what? Once again, what the hell is anybody going to do about it? And we've seen this tweeted in various forms by various of you out there over the past day or two. It's not a self-executing thing. We just can't stand around and just say, well, the Constitution forbids this. And I mean, if You already knew this, but in case you didn't, in case you were new to the idea of like, what do I mean by self-executing, for instance? One, there's no penalty attached clearly. I mean, one penalty would be, well, we can resort to impeachment and remove him from office, etc. But it's not just the absence of a penalty. It's the absence of a clear, easy, understandable, and executable, what do we do if? An escape clause. What process do we set in motion if this is violated? And, you've seen it happening with the emoluments clause. Clear violation of the emoluments clause, I think. And I think everybody else really thinks so too. But sure, there are people who are professionally engaged in saying, no, there's gray area. But even so, there's no clear process for getting an answer. And so you get to exploit that and continue doing it while everybody tears their hair out. So, okay, these views are incorrect, but so what? The magical fairness fairy doesn't show up and zap him. We just have to sit there and look for a way to bring the issue to a head such that, I don't know what, a judge or the Congress in impeaching him, and it won't happen in this Congress, so who cares, actually does something about it. There's really just no doing anything. You just write these things and say, yeah, there you go, and hope that public opinion turns against him and that therefore people then go to the polls and vote for Democrats to win seats in Congress and that they win enough to impeach him. This is a very lengthy and unsatisfying process. But the letter continues nonetheless. First, it says, the best understanding of Article 2, the best one, Article 2 of the Constitution, is that the presidential actions motivated by self-protection, self-dealing, or an intent to corrupt or suborn the legal system are unauthorized by and contrary to Article 2 of the Constitution. That's a terrific understanding. I only wish Donald Trump had that understanding, and I don't think he does. I mean, it's the best understanding of Article 2, that presidential actions that do this stuff, or that motivated by these horrible motivations, self-protection, self-dealing, or an intent to corrupt or suborn the legal system, it is good to understand that they're unauthorized by and contrary to the Article 2 of the Constitution and the entirety of the Constitution itself. But if you don't, then what? Nothing. We move on to the second point instead. Second, and even if one does not accept the foregoing construction of Article 2, and we are in that situation now, Congress has enacted obstruction of justice statutes that prohibit any person from acting, quote, corruptly, to interfere with federal criminal investigations. Whatever a president may have been able to do in the absence of such statutes, Congress's judgment that obstruction of justice is prohibited binds the president. Except, of course, if you are of the magical theory that prevails in the White House, and not just in this White House, not just in the Trump White House. It was very clearly the belief of the Bush White House, too, though many old Bush hands. Oh my God. Just thinking about what the president said on Access Hollywood and thinking, that's a clip I don't want to isolate. Anyway, and many old aides in the Bush White House, okay, whatever, or supporters of the George W. Bush White House actually said just the same thing, although many of them now profess to be appalled by the results of having supported a unitary executive theory that was, well, based in nothing, basically, except like modern mythos about the presidency. And I think that grows from casually saying things like that. The office makes that person the most powerful person in the world, or referring to them constantly as the commander-in-chief. I definitely saw this happen in the George W. Bush White House, and I have seen it literally, like word for word, repeated during the Trump administration as well. And I think Giuliani used the term also, and talking about the unitary executive and saying that essentially the president is the entirety of the executive branch, and everyone else who works in it is just sort of an extension of him. By virtue of the fact that one person cannot actually do all of the things, the authority that that person holds as president is delegated in some small part directly from the president to whoever is acting on his behalf inside of the executive branch. And it has never really been the interpretation of the Constitution, even the Constitution using, even when it uses the terminology of commander-in-chief, it's very clear that it is about you are the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the United States, not the commander of everything. You know what I mean? This is a very weird phenomenon among Republicans. They have a very literal approach to things. And I guess, like anybody, they give themselves the reading that's the most beneficial to their interests. When commander-in-chief is mentioned in the Constitution, for instance, in Article 2, Section 2, same section we were looking at yesterday with respect to the pardon power. Right up at the beginning, though, the president shall be commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the United States. And then semicolon, and we find out some other things the president can do. He can require the opinion and writing of the principal officer in each of the executive departments upon any subject relating to the duties of their respective offices. Now talking about administering cabinet secretaries. We're done with the commander-in-chief. The fact that that comes first in the sentence and that the sentence is separated by semicolons does not mean that the president is the commander-in-chief of the cabinet or of the cabinet departments. Now, he is the chief executive with respect to those, but he's not referred to as the commander-in-chief. And even referring to somebody as the commander-in-chief really doesn't mean anything in particular. It's imbued with a certain meaning within military circles because military people have a protocol about commanders and the commands they issue. And the commander-in-chief really does have some really superior powers over the military. By necessity, that's just the nature of a military organization. But it doesn't mean, as Republicans keep insisting it does whenever they get in trouble and need to find an excuse to get out of it, that the president is the commander-in-chief of everything American, everything in America. You, chug that beer faster. Why should I? I wish to enjoy it by sipping. Well, one, it's not good beer, so you're not going to be able to do that. And two, I am the commander-in-chief. God damn it. Well, I'm not a military member, and even if I was, surely drinking this beer isn't an on-duty military act. Does not matter. I am the commander-in-chief. I'm the commander of everything in America. That beer, which is a Budweiser, I note, by the way, and that is Beer USA. It is even red, white, and blue on the can. In fact, here's what I command. You chug that beer as fast as you can. Beer, though, inside there, I command you, molecules and everything, don't go into that guy's mouth. I want to do a magic trick. You tip your head back, turn the can over your mouth, bring it away from your lips so we can see that the liquid is obeying my commands and not pouring into your mouth. Why is it not happening? I command all matter within the jurisdiction of the United States of America as commander-in-chief. Even if you don't rely on this sort of magical explanation of things, you're not the commander of every American. You cannot order an American, to drop and give you 20 if they're a civilian. I suppose if you show up at a military camp and think you can get away with it and say to any passing service member, drop and give me 20, I suppose they would have to do it as commander-in-chief. If you walk out of the White House and say it to anybody who happens to be hanging around in Lafayette Square Park, drop and give me 20. They might do it, maybe in a spirit of friendly camaraderie, or just out of patriotism. Or they might say, I can't do that, or I don't want to do that, or I don't know who you are, or I hate you, or you're orange, and I don't like that. And that's not nice, but you could find that to be the case. You're not the commander of everybody in America. And it's a widespread Republican phenomenon. I think I will file it in the same stupid category I make up for myself as wherever I don't know what the label would be, but I'll put it next to that thing where Republicans refer to attorneys general as general. It's in the name, but it's what part of speech is it? Is it an adjective? I guess the general part. What is your jurisdiction? It is a general jurisdiction as the top law enforcement official. I'm the attorney whose mandate is general, not the commanding general of all attorneys in this state or in this country. But you see this all the time, and it happens even with surgeon generals who argue, I don't know, does surgeon general, is that a military rank? There are very often military doctors, but not always. And so I thought perhaps there's some difference between the surgeon, but I don't think so. I think once again, it's the surgeon general. That is, what kind of surgeon are you? I'm the general guy in charge of medicine in this country. And I might not even be a surgeon, really, but I'm certainly not a general, and neither is the attorney general. But this is the sort of thing that American conservatives like to do, and I don't know whether it's entirely, whether they really mean it or they just think, well, a lot of dumb people will think that this is a much more serious person, which is what I need them to think for whatever reason at this particular moment. If I call them general, why I should stand up and salute a general. That's an attorney general. That's totally different. And you know what else fits in that category? Yesterday's reaction to the Supreme Court case in the, I don't know, what the hell did they call it? I only remember it as that stupid case where the guys didn't want to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding. Who knows? I didn't track this case closely. And yesterday, you would have seen the news. They came out with a ruling, a 7-2 ruling, actually in favor of these idiot cake bakers. But they said they were reporting it as a narrow ruling, which has a very definitive, a real definition as a term of art in the law. We'll talk about it after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're not making much progress in catching you up with the news, but we're having a good discussion. That's a lot of times what Tuesdays are about. We catch you up on the news when Greg Dworkin is here, and we babble about whatever is in our minds when he's not. Why do I babble about whatever happens to come to mind? Because Donald Trump is president, and we hate people who... This is now dawning on me. I have big problems. Anyway, I think I think it's interesting to discuss this sort of thing, and my wife won't do that here with me. She can't stand it anymore, so I have to take it out on you guys, and you guys actually enjoy it, so there we go. And well, that probably is also something similar to a problem that Donald Trump has. It just manifests itself differently as between him and me. So anyway, yes, yesterday, Donald Trump Jr. was among the very many, I don't know whether they were being earnest or not, Republicans and conservatives who insisted that they were angry with the press for portraying the 7-2 opinion of the Supreme Court in yesterday's reported case as narrow. How could it be narrow? It was 7-2. No, it wasn't a narrow victory for this party in the case. It was a narrow ruling, which is how we describe rulings that don't apply broadly to all parties in similar cases. A narrow ruling would be one on a very specific point of law, or one that applies only to a very narrow slice of society who could possibly find themselves in such a situation. That is to say, it might not apply, and I didn't read the opinion, but a narrow opinion on a cake baking case, a hypothetical one, not necessarily this one. What do we mean in case for some reason you're having difficulty grasping this? Because it's not obvious on its face, I will say that. But to an educated person, it's pretty quickly graspable. Well, maybe a an educated person would object and say it would be more easily grasped, not graspable, but I don't think that's incorrect. But a narrow ruling on a hypothetical cake baking case, similar to the one on which people are commenting, would be if the ruling had said, for instance, because baking a cake is so unique among the skills that anybody can exhibit, we declare that it is unfair to demand that a cake baker utilize these skills for anyone other than clients of whom he approves for whatever reason. And we just simply cannot demand that such a unique individual employs such unique skills at the behest of any random person who approaches them with enough money. Whatever. I mean, let's say that's the ruling. A broad ruling, an interpretation of a broad ruling would then be, okay, I want not a cake made, but rather one of those fresh fruit bouquets from Edible Arrangements. Okay? Something like that. I want a fresh fruit platter made for me. Well, I'm not going to make it, says, let's hypothesize the most fantastic fruit platter arranger in town. I want this for my same-sex wedding. No, I refuse. I just realized what I'm doing with the word fruit here. This is not going to work. But I'm not going to do the fruit platter for you because Sharia, let's say. Something for a Muslim wedding. I refuse to give you fruit. Whatever it's going to be. Let it be anything. Right? A broad ruling would mean that this person would be able to stand on the ruling in the case of the cake baker and say, well, clearly, if it applied to cake bakers, it will apply to me because fruit is also food. Or I am exhibiting some sort of a skill and you are not. Or whatever it is. It's similar enough in kind to what happened with the cake baker for me to reasonably believe it applies to me as well. Now, in a narrow ruling, that would be a misunderstanding. The case would make its way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court would say, it says very clearly right here that this has to do with the particular skills involved in cake baking, and this is not a cake. Fruit is not a cake, which would only mean that the next baker, the baker of fruit cakes, would also find his way to the Supreme Court and say, aha, I have you now. And they would say, we are speaking of a particular kind of cake, in this case, a wedding cake. I mean, that's what a narrow ruling would be. If the Supreme Court continued to say, no, even though you make a cake, it's not the kind of cake we were talking about, that would be an indication that the ruling was narrow. Even if it was unanimous in the decision, a 9-0 narrow ruling, a broad ruling, they would say, well, of course this applies to fruit platter arrangers as well. It makes no sense if it doesn't. Broad. Or, well, by the reasoning we used, we were only talking about cakes and wedding cakes at that. Narrow. But these guys love to make this confusion anyway. So the president is the commander of everything there is, every molecule in America. In addition to those in overseas territories and in the embassies of the United States of America on foreign soil. Just to be clear. And also attorneys general are not army generals or anything else for that matter. You're no kind of general. And originally I would imagine we would find that the original nomenclature of generals, even in the army, that they are general officers. That is to say, their jurisdiction is general within the branch, but whatever. Even so, we now misunderstand these things. And also, I guess now we add narrow rulings to that pile, among other things. I'm sure there are more examples of it. Let's see. Catching up with other comments. Karen, yes. Okay, thank you. I think we're clear now. Karen, on that other comment, it's hard to joke about the fake Melania at that kind of an event, although Trump is the freaking president, so YOLO. And as a matter of fact, it is hard to joke about that, except that Trump did it at the event, and so we know it couldn't be put past him. Well, we tried to put it past him. He wouldn't let it get past him. He grabbed it up and made it his own. Kate Sherrill shares with us a tweet from Matt Negrin, who says, I will Venmo any White House reporter $200 to ask Donald Trump to recite the words to the national anthem. And I think that's an easy one, because a reporter will say that, and then Trump will say, that's stupid, or ignore it entirely and walk away, and then you'll be out $200. I Venmo $200 to any, I would download Venmo, and then I would use it, presumably, to send $200 to any White House reporter who gets Donald Trump to attempt to recite the words. But then we'll find out that he had an earpiece in and someone was sneaking him the words, and he cheated at that too. Bill reminds me that, or asks, I guess, do you think the commander-in-chief knows that Budweiser is now owned by the Belgians? I am sure that he does not know that. I didn't know that. And, that makes me commander-in-chief according to the Constitution. So that's good news. I get to replace him. That's a simple solution. Why didn't I think of that before? So who knows what he knows? He doesn't know, for instance, that, for like Daimler Chrysler is one company, and he's going to be banning all German cars, and we don't know what that means. That'll catch up with him as well. There's no chance he knows that Budweiser is now owned by the Belgians. Now, why did the Belgians do that? Would be a bigger question, and maybe a better one. And I guess they must be interested in money. How odd. What else have we got here? Michael Musson commenting, the Surgeon General is not military. It's very often, I guess, a military officer will end up as Surgeon General. And that's my only hesitation. Like, they're so frequently seen in uniform. That must be just because they're military doctors. Michael says that must be the case, I guess, because he says the Surgeon General isn't military. However, most branches have their own. Surgeon General of the United States Army, Surgeon General of the United States Navy. Yes. And Surgeon General of the United States Air Force. Okay, so that makes a good deal of sense. And I don't know, maybe they choose very often from among those ranks a Surgeon General to serve. Not always the case, but a lot of the more famous Surgeon Generals have been military and made a point of being photographed in military garb. I think that was the case with Dr. Koop and Jocelyn Elders. I think were both. I picture them in my head in uniform. So maybe I just don't recall it correctly, but I think so. Anyway, I think that clears things up. Useful for our consideration. This reminds me, we left off in all this from the middle of, how did I get distracted from this stupid letter from the law professors? Oh my goodness. Too many tangents going on here. And I guess it must have been about people misunderstanding all sorts of things that appear in the Constitution for their own purposes. I think we were reading. Wow, that is a long tangent. The 2 points being made. First, that the best understanding of Article 2 was that the president can't do these things for self-protection, self-dealing, and an intent to corrupt or suborn the legal system. But they very wisely then took up, secondly, if one does not accept the foregoing construction of Article 2, Congress has enacted obstruction of justice statutes that prohibit people from acting corruptly to interfere with federal criminal investigations. Whatever a president may have been able to do in the absence of such statutes, Congress's judgment that obstruction of justice is prohibited binds the president. But people do have weird interpretations of the Constitution. I think that might have been where we took off on these things. Now, the letter continues with respect to Article 2 and faithful execution of the laws, I guess, and not the faithful execution of the president, which would be terrific, but we're not there yet. While Article 2 empowers the president to execute the laws, it also constrains him in so doing. The take care clause requires that the president, quote, shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Emphasis added here on faithfully, they note. By the way, once again, we are reminded that here's a weird thing to think about. reading the actual text of the Constitution or quoting the actual text of the Constitution with the original usage of capitalization, we think of that as like charming and archaic, but clearly the product of a sharp and intellectually trained mind. Yes? Why is it then that when we see it tweeted that way by the current president of the United States that we think he's an idiot and doesn't understand the rules of grammar? Maybe we have not been giving him a fair shake on this. Or maybe there were actual rules to capitalization back in the day, and this text observes those rules, whereas there's no relationship between those archaic but real rules and the way Donald Trump tweets. I suspect that might be the case. But it's just worth pointing out because we're so fair. All right. Article 2 contains a mandatory oath of office whereby the president must swear to faithfully execute the office of the president. P.S. Is it mandatory? Everyone thinks so. Is it mandatory of members of Congress? It says that they're supposed to take their own oath, and it lays out what their oath should be, or the elements of the oath. I think the oath, the actual wording of the oath is laid out in the Constitution for the president. The oath taken by members of Congress is similar, but is not prescribed in the constitutional text, but I guess it's implied that it ought to be a similar oath. But once again, mandatory? Yes or no? Because a couple of years ago, half of America was arguing that it wasn't mandatory at all, and I was crazy for saying that it had anything to do with your assumption of office. But here we are again. You know what I'm talking about. I hope. Otherwise, this is a huge waste of time, and I'm crazy. So, Article 2 contains this mandatory oath of office whereby the president must swear to faithfully execute the office of president. Like the take care clause, the oath also conceives of the president's role as a duty to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, not a personal power. And we definitely spent some time on this early on in the Trump administration, that Trump does not differentiate. I don't know whether he can't or won't, but he does not differentiate between personal power and delegated duties of office and the powers that accompany that. And he makes no distinction between the government that he administers and personality. In other words, I do believe, well, certainly I know that he thinks of himself very clearly as commander-in-chief, and really does believe, because he's a simpleton and an autocrat, that he is in charge of every molecule of matter within the jurisdiction of the United States, and that derives from the Constitution, not his idiotic understanding of things. He is wrong, but he does believe that, and we have a madness of King George problem here, in that when the president, we have been trained to believe, when the president comes to believe something, that has meaning beyond what it means when a regular person comes to believe something. They could be proven wrong, but in the case of the president of the United States, there's an entire government and all the powers that be within it that can be brought to bear to make that true, or make it at least effectively true, such that all of the rest of us either have to believe it as well, or at least subject ourselves to an interpretation of the laws and statutes and Constitution of the United States that will henceforth assume that it is true. It's a very weird thing to become president. Anyway, I don't think he differentiates, and I also think it extends far beyond even that which we would traditionally recognize as being a power arising from the Constitution and the laws of the United States. I believe that he thinks that the White House is his personal property right now, and that he can do what he will with it. I believe that he believes that the towels on Air Force One are his, and that he can take them with him when he leaves office. If he leaves office. I mean, I think that's where his brain is, because he's deficient mentally, not because of a constitutional theory he holds. the others around him have to try and justify it as constitutional theory, and they're bending over backwards to do it, and the rest of us are supposed to look to that as justification, not the idiocy of Donald Trump. I don't believe that because I am also an idiot. I believe it because the Constitution says the president shall have the power to blah, 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 and then some attorneys wrote it up and made it look legal and put some interesting terminology in it, and they did it in suits and ties, and so that's that, and I got to report it as such. We have that. That's our system. When the founders thus defined the presidency, the letter continues, as an office bound and restricted by overarching duties of care and faithfulness, fidelity, that is, they say, to the Constitution and laws of the United States, they were invoking the well-known concept of treating a public officer as a fiduciary. We know what Trump thinks of fiduciaries, of course. One of the first acts out of the box in the first year of his presidency was to revoke the federal rules requiring that financial advisors act as fiduciaries. I don't think he has a very high opinion of fiduciaries, except that he doesn't know what they are, and it can't be very important or helpful if it has douche right in the middle of the word. I'm just thinking as the president would here. In the 18th century, as today, English and American law required fiduciaries to act always with due care, solely for the good of their beneficiaries, and to abstain from self-dealing, corruption, and other kinds of self-interested actions. Trump, of course, has no experience with this and wouldn't want any, even if it was offered to him. And this is one of the mistakes made in considering him a businessman. For instance, when we all say, we need a businessman to run this country because businessmen are the people who know how to, do anything. We're fiscally responsible. When people say that, they're generally thinking about businessmen who head publicly held companies, those that are accountable to shareholders and outside stakeholders, et cetera, bound by legal principles, many of which do not apply to the heads of privately held companies like the Trump Organization. He's never been responsible to outside shareholders or outside directors, and many of the regulations that apply to publicly traded companies do not apply to privately held companies. He has no experience, therefore, acting as a fiduciary for anyone, and 100% of his business experience has been about making deals in which he is the beneficiary. And there isn't any dealing that he does that isn't self-dealing. Whether it's corrupt or not is another question. But the idea that he has any experience as a fiduciary for others is ridiculous. He simply doesn't have it. But again, because it's too complicated to say, no, how do you campaign on what this country needs to run it properly, to make America great again? What this country really needs is a fiduciary in the White House. Try putting that one on a bumper sticker. And of course you do that, and what does America say? He said douche. So it doesn't really work. And of course, most people don't actually know what it means, but you say businessman, that's shorthand for someone who we understand normally to act as a fiduciary for the company, at least, for the shareholders of the companies at a minimum, if you're an MBA, stakeholders, if you are a normal person. Sorry, MBAs. But you know how that background goes. We're going to catch up on that in a little bit too, a couple of days from now. Anyway, I think that explains an awful lot. Why we think a businessman would be a good president and why Donald Trump isn't that. One, he's not a good businessman, so it was never going to work. Two, he's a private businessman, not a publicly held company's businessman. Three, he's a demented idiot and was never going to be able to do anything, no matter what kind of business he ran. The president's duties of care and faithfulness are the fiduciary duties most explicitly required by the Constitution, a document that refers to many offices as, quote, offices of trust, capitalized there, by the way, invoking the legal concept of trusteeship, which is a fiduciary relationship. Again, though, we're The other side would just say, oh, you're playing word games. It says what it says. Mirroring the Constitution's text, the Federalist Papers, which were not adopted as the Constitution in this country, but were written by people who were totally serious about it, repeatedly used the language of care, faith, and trust to describe the offices and duties of all three branches of the federal government and the way their powers should be exercised on behalf of the American people. George Washington, you know that guy, in the opening lines of his first inaugural address, spoke of the presidency as a trust committed to him by the American people. He was right, but that's not binding, but okay. The founders' carefully chosen words, if that's what they are, with their well-known meanings, if that's what they have, reflect a conception of a chief magistrate, not a commander-in-chief, but a chief magistrate who is duty-bound to act with faithfulness to the law and the people, not to his own selfish interests. But remember, greed is good, so maybe selfish interests aren't so bad. And besides which, you've just compounded your problem by telling me that your douche guy or whatever has a lot of duty. Ha ha ha. And so America loses interest and we slide further into chaos. But it was funny. A similar view of the office underlies the conclusion of the Department of Justice's Office of Legal Counsel, that a president may not pardon himself. But those guys were fiducians, so don't listen to them. It is not strange that the founders chose to create a chief executive who would be bound to act for public-spirited reasons rather than pursuing self-interest, self-dealing, or self-protection. Monarchy and all of its attendant ills were rejected by the founders. Eventually they were, though there was some contemplation of whether or not to offer George Washington a crown of some sort. The president would not be a king by another name. We eventually landed on that solution. By banning titles of nobility, that's a good clue, and providing that the president would be elected to a term of years, not chosen on hereditary principles, Bush's, and not ruling for life, the Constitution addressed the fear that a chief executive's primary interest would be perpetuation of his dynastic successors and retainers rather than the good of the country, as indeed was the case elsewhere. Many English kings had been foreign-born and still held lands and titles abroad, giving them personal interests that might differ from those of the citizenry. In response, our Constitution requires that the president be a citizen. The president was to be given a salary while in office and prohibited from imposing taxes or otherwise raising funds on his own authority, and also positively barred from accepting bribes, gifts, or other emoluments of office from foreign governments or state governments. Typically, monarchical kinds of financial self-dealing by the chief magistrate were therefore substantially checked. And, importantly, the Constitution was conceived at a time when the English Bill of Rights constrained even the monarch from exercising the so-called dispensing power to dispense with or suspend acts of Parliament. Our Constitution similarly limits the president and certainly cannot be read to grant him a power the British monarch lacked. These structural checks against abuses typical of monarchy further elucidate the founders' vision, seen in the Oath and Take Care clause, of a chief executive bound to act with care and fidelity for the benefit of the country, not himself personally. Other structural provisions of the Constitution, which evidence a norm against self-dealing, support this reading. The president's executive powers, therefore, would not permit him to terminate the Russia investigation by firing the special counsel, or his Department of Justice supervisors would not allow him to order the destruction of evidence developed in the special counsel's investigation, or to pardon himself or other subjects of the special counsel's investigation, or to attempt to quash a subpoena if the president takes any of these actions motivated predominantly by self-interest. Indeed, the Constitution, properly understood, would prohibit all of these actions under those conditions. And maybe we have a problem right there as well. Remember how difficult it is to get anybody in the press to simply call a lie a lie. They will do it occasionally when you can convince them that, well, now we are clear on what the president's motivations are. Well, here, I guess we're maybe stuck with the same problem. If the president takes any of these actions motivated predominantly by self-interest, then we have a problem. Now, nobody I know believes that he's motivated by anything but self-interest. However, all you have to do is raise the question, and you find yourself in trouble. Now, I think we all would reach the same conclusion if we were honest about things, but of course, we're not all going to be that. That would be ridiculous. Then we would all be in agreement that he was totally unfit for office, and that's clearly not the case. We'll continue after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Nation. We are Netroots Nation, Netroots Radio. Netroots Nation is probably coming up. Gosh, I've lost track of when it's happening, but later on this summer, I'm sure I'll be busy once again, but sitting here and entertaining you, nonetheless, and awaiting anxiously your reports from on site. However, we are on Netroots Radio, and that's that. Here's something I learned during the break. We have not yet finished up the letter here. I knew that. That wasn't what I learned, but Michael Musson has continued on his commentary. We've turned him into a real Kagro in the Morning enthusiast, of course, and now he tweets out facts to us on the KITM hashtag, just like he was rambling on the show with me. This is fantastic. Harkening back to the Surgeon General and the uniforms. It turns out, I don't remember necessarily every one of them showing up all the time in uniform, but I don't track the movements of the Surgeon General closely enough. But now I'm going to. The Surgeon General is not military, right? We learned that. However, most of the branches have their own Surgeon Generals. But check this out. The Surgeon General, and this I knew in the back of my mind, but I didn't think about what it really meant. The Surgeon General is commissioned head of the U.S. Public Health Service Commissioned Corps. I knew he was the head of the U.S. Public Health Service. That seems pretty obvious. But yeah, there is in particular a U.S. Public Health Service Commissioned Corps. They wear uniforms but are not military. Why? What sorts of military? Well, all sorts of people wear uniforms but aren't military. Police wear uniforms but aren't military. Postal service workers, well, letter carriers anyway. And not all of them anymore wear uniforms but aren't military, right? Well, the other often overlooked uniformed service, didn't know this, is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Commissioned Officer Corps. Is that like, hey, fly into this hurricane? What? F you. No. Are you crazy? Well, we got to get in there. I'm not flying in there. Well, I'll tell you what. You are now a commissioned officer in the NOAA Commissioned Officer Corps, and I order you to fly into the hurricane. Well, now that you put it that way, I guess I will. Is that what is happening, or are we just using military pilots to do this flying, or are they on loan from the military and to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Commissioned Officer Corps, or am I misunderstanding this relationship entirely? Well, the existence of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Commissioned Officer Corps, and there goes the last half of the show, is news to me. I'd like to find out more about it. I can probably do so by Googling later. Wednesday's show will be all about that, I guess. Why not? And, I am going to, I got something I have to put aside for later here. Sorry, got distracted about something else now. However, that is something I want to definitely Google. Look at this last fact that Michael includes here. I think the country, well, it's not a fact, an opinion. I think the country is missing the opportunity to have more weather people wearing uniforms. That is, yeah, I think that's actually a pretty interesting thought. And I wonder if it would have, now I think it's too late, but I wonder if it would have made it more difficult to resist climate change theory in the earlier days if people were in uniform delivering stuff. I mean, at this point, Republicans just aren't going to buy it, and Republicans hate people in uniform, military or otherwise, just as virulently as they hate anyone else when the opportunity arises and when it serves their purposes. So I don't know who I'm fooling by thinking that they would take a uniform seriously. Still, it might have been interesting. All right, so back to the letter. We were continuing on here. Because the president does have vast powers as head of the executive branch, and because the difference between public interested, that is constitutional, and corrupt, that is unauthorized and hence unconstitutional, presidential actions may often turn on the reasons for which the actions are taken. Here's our problem. The lawyers for a president have an especially important obligation of their own to the Constitution and people of the United States. The president's lawyers must counsel their client so that he understands that acting for the right reasons is the key to lawfully exercising the great power he wields. That's a problem because, of course, he has terrible and often corrupt attorneys working for him, and that is preventing them either from doing their job properly or causing them to intentionally do the job improperly, as the case may be. It also means that they're not off the hook. And as I was saying the other day, that, for instance, if, as they alleged, the president could not obstruct justice, if we were to accept for the sake of argument that they were right about that, that's why I said, well, fine, and then the charge is sedition instead. You are undermining the constitutional order that is the foundation of the United States and the American government. I'll charge you with the old-fashioned and somewhat archaic charge of sedition instead, but that also is going to have to mean that the attorneys are co-conspirators in this. And that's dangerous and worrisome because we are used to normal times, and these are not normal times. In normal times, we would say, no, it's very dangerous to suggest that the attorneys who offer a zealous defense, even of the most loathsome defendant, and boy, is this the most loathsome defendant, people are entitled to that zealous defense. You can't charge the attorneys. That's a autocrat's move. That's way outside of the American norm to charge a defendant's attorneys with a crime for defending this defendant. Of course, one, not normal times, but that's not enough. What if the crime is of a very particular and very special nature? What if the crime is undermining the United States government? In other words, something that would ordinarily perhaps be described as treason if it was provable that the co-conspirators were foreign enemies. But if they're not, or you can't make the case that very clearly and beyond a reasonable doubt connects the conspiracy to cooperation with foreign enemies, but you are instead charging with sedition, where the accomplices can be Americans, so long as they are likewise acting in furtherance of this conspiracy to undermine the American system of government in general. Well, if it's the attorneys who are constructing the argument that it is proper for the President of the United States to undertake to undermine the government of the United States, I have a hard time not charging you. But for any other crime, if you were trying to fix his parking tickets, I might say it was a stretch. All right. Now that we're into dangerous territory, we'll continue on with the second part of this letter. Congress's obstruction statutes and the separation of powers. In addition to internal constraints imposed on the president by the text of Article 2 and constitutional structure, the president is also externally constrained to avoid obstruction of justice. The mistaken claim that Article 2 provides a complete defense to obstruction by the president, that is, by saying, well, he is the Department of Justice, so if he were to simply unplug the inquiry into his actions, it wouldn't be obstruction of justice. It would, by definition, be the administration of justice. That's the argument here. The mistaken claim that, therefore, there is this complete defense to obstruction rests in part on the incorrect premise that the Constitution grants him the exclusive right to execute the executive powers. That's interesting. A president's Article 2 powers must be read in conjunction with the restrictions the Constitution places on the federal government, Congress's Article 1 powers, and the court's Article 3 powers, as well as laws duly enacted by Congress. The administration of justice involves all three branches of government. I guess that's true in many ways, right? The limitation of the president's exercise of Article 2 powers is perhaps easiest to understand in the context of the Bill of Rights. For instance, it would violate the First and Fifth Amendments for the president to fire federal employees based on their race or religion. To give another example, the Due Process Clause requires that persons wielding prosecutorial power be, quote, disinterested. The Constitution must be read as a whole. None of its provisions, including Article 2, is an island. Most importantly for our purposes, Congress can also exercise its constitutional authority to place limits on the executive. When Congress legislates within its constitutional authority in a manner that restricts the president is presumptively bound to comply with that law. After all, Congress is expressly given power to enact laws, quote, necessary and proper for implementing the powers of the president. Of course, the unitary executive / imperial presidency rejoinder to this, the response to this is, no, they can't because I'm the commander of everything. That's literally it. And that doesn't feel persuasive at all. Congressional limitations upheld by the Supreme Court on the president's exercise of his war powers in a case such as Hamdan are especially instructive. There, the court held that Congress could specify procedures for the president to follow for trying military detainees at Guantanamo. If Congress can constrain the president's vast powers as commander-in-chief, and here we mean of the military for real, in times of war, which it isn't because we haven't declared one, but okay, then it can surely place limits on his conduct in his everyday role as the head of our domestic law enforcement agencies. And indeed, that is exactly what Congress and the courts have done. Even though the executive branch is generally empowered with law enforcement responsibility, Congress has enacted civil service laws and created independent agencies limiting the executive branch's power to hire and fire federal employees who enforce the law. Of course, it's Donald Trump's opinion that all that stuff is unconstitutional because I'm the CEO of this country. That's why the people elected me, even though you've never been the CEO of anything wherein you had a public duty to anyone. In upholding the statute that provided for an independent counsel, rather than the Department of Justice, to investigate wrongdoing in the upper reaches of the executive branch, the Supreme Court concluded that we simply do not see how it is so central to the functioning of the executive branch as to require, as a matter of constitutional law, that the president be understood to have unlimited control over the investigation and prosecution of potential crimes involving himself or his top aides. Of course, that doesn't matter quite as much because we don't have an independent counsel statute anymore, but when we did, and the challenge was to its constitutionality, the Supreme Court held, no, you're wrong. The independent counsel statute is quite constitutional. Thank you very much. Now, of course, just yesterday, the president tweeted that the special counsel's appointment was unconstitutional as well. And here we would probably have to guess that a broad interpretation of a broad ruling in the independent counsel case would likely apply here too. If it was perfectly constitutional to have an independent counsel because it was simply not evident to the court how it was so central to the functioning of the executive branches to require that the president be understood to have unlimited control over any investigation of anything involving himself or his top aides. It wouldn't necessarily matter very much at all whether that was being investigated by an independent counsel or a special counsel. Either way, we simply do not see how it's so central to the functioning of the executive branch that the president must be understood to have unlimited control of this thing. And it wouldn't matter who was doing the investigating so long as it was duly authorized by statute, which it is. As Richard Pildes, I'm guessing, Pildes, wrote recently, given the established constitutional principle that Congress can protect the federal prosecutor from the president's domination in these types of cases, Congress can certainly constrain the president's power in more limited ways, including by making it a crime for the president to act with a corrupt intent to stymie or shut down investigations of the president himself and his top aides. It is only in rare cases that the president has constitutional power that is both exclusive and conclusive on a particular issue, thereby disabling Congress from legislating. And it would likewise be in only a very rare case that generally applicable federal criminal statutes would not apply to the president because of inconsistency with Article 2. The Constitution, after all, directly contemplates that the president and other officers could be subject to criminal liability for their official actions. While the president might, for example, intervene directly in an ongoing criminal investigation to advance a public interested goal concerning national security or some other consideration, it is implausible to contend that Article 2 overrides Congress's obstruction of justice statutes in circumstances where the president is acting to advance, quote, narrowly personal, pecuniary, or partisan interests. The federal obstruction laws, with their bar on corruptly motivated actions, apply whether the president obstructs an investigation through firing officials leading it, shutting down the investigation, ordering the destruction of documents, or dangling or issuing pardons to induce witnesses to impede the investigation. Just as the president could not otherwise use lawful firing powers in exchange for a bribe without running afoul of federal bribery laws, he is not free to exempt himself from the application of the obstruction of justice laws. The office of the president is not a get-out-of-jail-free card for lawless behavior. Oh well. Indeed, our country's founders make it clear in the Declaration of Independence, which isn't binding, that they did not believe that even a king had such powers. They specifically cited King George's obstruction of justice as among the injuries and usurpations that justified independence. Our founders would not have created, and did not create, a constitution that would permit the president to use his powers to violate the laws for corrupt and self-interested reasons. In sum, but they may have done it by accident. In sum, both Article 2 and the criminal laws of this country forbid the president from engaging in corrupt and self-dealing conduct, even when exercising Article 2 powers to execute the laws. We have no doubt that you take your professional roles very seriously. I do. And we hope our legal analysis will provide some illumination as you continue to advise your client to faithfully execute our laws and to take care that those laws are faithfully executed throughout the executive branch. Sincerely, and here are some signatures, Erwin Chemerinsky, let's see, Norm Eisen is on this as well, Aziz Hook, Andrew Kent, Ethan Lieb. We've got a long list of names. Any of these familiar to those of you listening? Yeah, there are probably a couple of them here. Eric Posner is on here. Asha Rangappa is on here. Lawrence Tribe is here, etc., etc. Oh, and copies sent to a number of federal officials as well, including Rod Rosenstein. So, interesting letter. I think it's very persuasive because I am a normal human being and even have spent some time studying this stuff. Donald J. Trump does not think it's very interesting and thinks it's all a bunch of stuffed shirt lawyer gobbledygook and you can all stick it. So, although that was probably Michael Cohen's comment, not his. But interesting to note and interesting to debate. And, oh well, YOLO, LOL, nothing matters. Okay, let's see. In the news, I'll just mention this. There isn't much to it. And the report I put aside was just a breaking news alert. I'm sure there's more news about it, but we haven't time to discuss it in depth. And all you need to know is the special master in Michael Cohen's case has come back with an initial report. Not really sure what to make of it. I'm sure there's been some analysis since this breaking news alert yesterday, but just to let you know what was happening in that case, the special master has reviewed at least some significant number of the documents and other items seized in the raids of his home, office, and hotel room, whatever that's supposed to be about. Is he selling used mattresses out of there or what? We forgot to get to that one. Just a second. But anyway, apparently the initial report released yesterday found that relatively few documents in that initial tranche, anyway, of documents that seized from Cohen in a raid met the standard of being subject to attorney-client privilege. What was weird was the numbers that were given made me, I was a little confused about exactly what was the inquiry here. In a report to the court, Special Master Barbara Jones said Cohen's lawyers and Trump's lawyers had identified 17 items in an initial group of 8 boxes that they believed to be privileged or partially privileged out of 639 total. So 639 items reviewed, 17 found to be privileged or partially privileged. Of those 17, Jones agreed with them on 14 and rejected the claim of privilege on the other 3. So that's the report. 14 of the 639 items are privileged, and the rest of them can't be protected by that claim. Among the contents of 2 phones and 1 iPad, Jones reports that Cohen's lawyers had flagged 156 items out of a total of more than 290,000. As either privileged, partially privileged, or highly personal. In this case, Jones agreed with the Trump organizations and Cohen's attorneys. So they have successfully protected 156 out of 290,000 items. I don't know where that number comes from. Also in the report, the 8 boxes had 639 items consisting of 12,543 pages. 14 of the 639 are privileged. 3 that they said should be privileged were not. And it makes me wonder, like, well, what kind of stuff? Really, that many things? 630 something. So 620 of the things they seized aren't privileged. I guess they're relevant, but not privileged. And I'm curious to know, what else. But I guess that's what comes from having only 3 clients. 2 of which may be fake. You're only going to find, but it's amazing that for all the bluster about attorney-client privilege, of the 639 things seized, Cohen's own lawyers and the Trump organization could only construct an argument that 17 of them were privileged. And they were wrong about that. Only 14 of them were genuinely privileged, according to the special master. Now, going 14 for 17 isn't bad, but I guess it's pretty funny that they were saying the raid itself is an outrage. Why? There's attorney-client privilege here. Well, not in about 620 of the cases that we're looking at. 14 out of 639, you're right. For the vast majority, you never knew what you were talking about, and you were talking out your ass, and I think it's important for you all to know that. Now, speaking of, I don't know what could I possibly be speaking of that would bring me to this? Scott Pruitt. We listed all the things that were wrong with that guy. He's corrupt. He's a thief. He's disgusting as a human being, generally speaking. And on top of that, he likes pens that are too expensive. It now turns out. I told you that was the case yesterday. And minutes after leaving the air yesterday, we found out another thing that he's after, possibly improperly, but surely in a very disgusting manner. This is the weirdest thing I've ever heard. CNN reported yesterday. Pruitt aide inquired about used Trump hotel mattresses for him. Now, you have likely heard this already. I'm late to the story because it happened yesterday, almost 22 hours ago. We found out about this. And you know how the news cycle is and what Twitter does to it. So, but seriously, in case you didn't hear it, House Democrats are asking Monday to subpoena records that they think will show that EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt used his staff. This is why it's a problem. Like, who cares if the guy likes dirty mattresses? I don't have any effing idea what you would be doing asking for these things. And it raises a lot of suspicions. No, seriously. It's not just that you're disgusting or cheap or weird. It's what the hell are you doing? And it could really literally be anything. But here's the reason that the members of Congress claim to have a serious interest in why does he want this disgusting item. It was that he was using his staff to run personal errands, including trying to buy a used mattress from the Trump International Hotel in Washington during his controversial apartment search. And it's, of course, much more than controversial. And I don't even really believe he was searching for an apartment. He was just looking for another freebie situation. Anyway, in an interview with House Oversight Committee members, one of Pruitt's top staffers, who describes herself as a personal friend of Pruitt, Million Hupp, not Million, M-I-L-L-I-O-N, but Milan, I guess, M-I-L-L-A-N, Milan Hupp, told investigators that she searched for rental properties for Pruitt and his wife for several hours a week over the course of several months, touring more than 10 of those properties during work hours. And I don't know what kind of an a-hole is so picky. 10? Just take, it's an apartment. Take one. Hupp, who works as a scheduler at EPA, said it was mostly over her lunch break, which she felt was appropriate, but Democrats on the committee are alleging it's a violation of rules that prevent federal employees using public office for private gain. They're asking Oversight Committee Chair Trey Gowdy to issue subpoenas for communications related to her work. When asked about the letter, EPA spokesman Jahan Wilcox said, "We're working diligently with Chairman Gowdy." I don't even care about this. Here's the point. One of the things that he's sending her on these errands to do is Hupp reached out to the managing director of the Trump International Hotel in Washington after Pruitt, quote, indicated that there could be a mattress that he could purchase, Hupp told the committee in her May 18th interview. Now, look, when you stay at some hotels, they have various little luxury items. They'll sell you the bathrobes. They'll even sell you the mattress. There's hotels that use us exclusively. They have a deal, you know. Serta provides all the mattresses for our hotel. And if you had a great night's sleep at our hotel, and this does happen. I've stayed at hotels and I'm like, God damn, this is a great mattress. I want one just like it. And you can do it. You can purchase it. And I think Trump even has one of those deals. What I have never said is, God damn, this was a great night's sleep. I want this mattress, this particular one, this mattress, which I hope is clean, but I have no idea about, but it's used in any case. And I would like a new version of it. Do you have any more in the back is what you ask. Scott Pruitt says, I want that one. And it leads me to suspicions. And I did see somebody tweet. I don't know if I can recover the thing. We'll see. It's so weird that it makes you think, like, most people thought, well, what are you, too cheap to buy a new mattress? And he is. He is too cheap to buy a new mattress. That's a possible excuse. But other people, since he was using public money to buy fancy stuff for himself all the time, why wouldn't he just get someone to buy him a fancy mattress new? And the only other thing somebody could think of was, did something happen? Is there like DNA evidence on this mattress? I want this one. I want this one removed. Now, you wouldn't say to the hotel management, I want this one because it's stained with DNA evidence that will implicate me in a court of law, and I don't want that to happen. You say, I had a great night's sleep and I want this mattress. And maybe you say, and I'm a cheap guy and I thought it would be cheaper if it was used or whatever. And at that point, the hotel manager goes, oh my God, disgusting, and calls the authorities. But, you know, in this administration, you don't do that. There's no reason in the world why you wouldn't think, one, I don't want a used mattress, and two, a brand new Serta Perfect Sleeper Trump model, whatever, which is available. He has a deal. You can buy these things. Would be just as good. In fact, better, because it's new and it's clean. But I will say this also in conjunction with the fact that we thought yesterday, why is Scott Pruitt, why has he got 24-hour security that's triple, quadruple the size of his predecessors? Why bulletproof glass? Why a soundproof office with biometric locks? Why a soundproof office with biometric locks and mattresses, used mattresses from the Trump International Hotel? Why would you be putting all that stuff together? I don't know. Uday Hussein is dead. They can't be advising him on building a rape room or anything, right? I put nothing past these freaks. But if you have an explanation for why he would want a used mattress, and why you would want somebody who wants a used mattress in their house, if that's the explanation, to be in charge of the Environmental Protection Agency, you tell me that. I got no idea.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
I didn't mean to get off on that, but I mean, why would you want that guy cleaning up the environment? He won't even clean his house. Look, what's coming up next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam has nothing to do with this stuff. It has to do with important items that people really want to spend their time on, and that's why you should stay tuned and listen up.